Disney did say that there was a wave of 7,000 layoffs coming. And people were just hoping that it wasn't them. The reputable wave of layoffs that just came through took about 20 members of their on-air talent. We're talking Max Kellerman, Susie Colbert, Keyshawn Johnson, Jeff Van Gundy, Todd McShay, Jalen Rose, Steve Young, Neil Everett, and even Ashley Brewer, who only rotated SportsCenter, but she got laid off days before her wedding. Neil Everett, 23 years on SportsCenter. Steve Young, been with the company since 2000. I mean, they cut an average of 20 years of experience. When you just add up all the experience from those few people I named there and you divide it out, they cut an average of 20 years of experience. Max Kellerman, Keyshawn Johnson, KJM is no more. Susie Colbert, 38 years in the business, 27 years with the company, an absolute legend. She says that her next project is something to give back. Big shocker on Todd McShay, Jalen Rose, Jeff Van Gundy. You guys heard the names, though, but we'll start from the top. I know it was the second question, but I'll make it the first one here. And even if I didn't list it, who is the most shocking release to you now that ESPN's first wave of layoffs has been established?
I don't want to mess his name up, and I'm a big fan of his, and shame on me for not getting his name before I came on. David Pollock?
Yeah, David Pollock. That
one broke my heart. As a fan of as a personal favorite of as I call them with my friends Davey P.
Yeah.
I was hurt by that one. Yeah. I was hurt. There are not many people that get me invested in college football the way that David Pollock has.
Yep.
Todd McShay.
Yeah, bro. Yeah.
Another one that was kind of like, what are we doing?
Yeah. Dude, that babysits the NFL mock draft.
When you look at,
gives us all the scoops.
Yeah, like when you look at, and so what I want to know is, and I guess with the like ESPN has kind of been shifting to this versatility thing with their on-air talent. Like you see Swagoo, obviously he makes most of his time on NFL Live, but you see him on Get Up from time to time. You see him on SportsCenter from time to time. You see him on First Take from time to time, right? Same thing with Perk, and like he's usually on NBA Today, but he'll like so
they got multiple gigs.
Yeah, but like guys like McShay and Pollock, for me personally, as someone that just enjoys the news of things, like without the theatrics,
yeah,
that a lot of the on-air talent brings, like let's just talk X's and O's on the field, off the field, no theatrics. Those two for me, hurt me the most
because it feels like they were so well respected, right?
Yeah,
especially Pollock. People had their shit about McShay and Max Kellerman and especially Jeff Van Gundy, but like when you look at Pollock's resume, you're just like, Jesus Christ.
I don't know if he has a blemish on his resume.
Right.
Like that's how good of a guy. I that one when I read the name, that one shocked me the most for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it comes down to a couple for me, as much as I hate to be that way, because, the first one I heard of was Max, and I just recently fell in love with KJM. I love that morning drive. Sure. I'm really there for Jay Williams. Luckily, he kept his job. Keyshawn Johnson has some good feedback. Max has good takes as well. I know he's been in the game for a while. He's had his bad, Iguodala and Tom Brady's fallen off the cliff and all this. But overall, Max goes back literally 25 years. And whether it's from, Max on Boxing or Friday Night Fights way, way back in the 80s and 90s, early 2000s, to First Take to this Justin, Max Kellerman was definitely a shot. But I've heard of Max Kellerman's job potentially being in jeopardy a couple times over the last few months and few years just because of, I feel like in a way he kind of blends in with Skip Bayless in a way. He's just not heartless. You know what I mean? Like Skip had those comments about DeMar Hamlin and has trashed Shannon Sharp a couple times on Skip and Shannon and RIP that show. I really hope Shannon, comes through with an opening, and that's kind of another point here we'll get to. But Max Kellerman, definitely shocking. I also got to say Neil Everett, man, 23 years on SportsCenter, all of his catchphrases, just all the people he had the opportunity of bringing onto that program, just anchoring it for so long. Jalen Rose as well. Let me talk about how they did Jalen Rose so dirty. Rose, first of all, 16 years into business. Jalen Rose, obviously, he's on the NBA broadcast crew next to the legendary Mike Breen, next to Mark Jackson as well. Or no, excuse me, that's Jeff Van Gundy, wrong person. But we know what Jalen Rose has done, with ESPN and with the NBA. He was supposed to be on Get Up the morning of his layoff. They even teased Jalen Rose coming on to the show, and ESPN cut his appearance, claimed it was audio issues, and then just a couple hours later laid him off. Did Jalen Rose absolutely filthy? And then I think the final one really for me is Susie Colbert. I mean, what complaints do we really have about Susie Colbert? One of the most iconic women to ever broadcast for sports. I mean, making the way for I don't know how far back these people might go, but the Sage Steeles and the Ashley Brewers and the Malika Andrews. I mean, all of those reputable females that, the Joy Taylors of the world. Like, let's not forget about these folks, the Ashley Nicole Moss on I Am Athlete. And that's a little more, outside the lines because they're on YouTube. But just the overall confidence for a woman to step into such a male dominated industry, whether it's sports, whether it's broadcasting, whether it's doing the on field reporting. 27 years with the company, just absolutely gone. It's mind blowing. So I'd have to say the most shocking one's probably Max. No, I'm not really shocked about Max as much as I hate to say that. I'd go Susie Colbert. God, Jalen Rose, Neil Everett. I mean, definitely Todd McShay. I'm shocked about a few of them for sure. And I mean, let's think about it. If guys like Max, Susie, Todd, Jalen, and Neil are losing their jobs, Stephen A. Smith even said it on his own show. He said, ladies and gentlemen, I could be next. He said, that is an actual possibility. He said, and I've busted my tail for this. As a black man in broadcasting on national television, I take nothing for granted. And I don't think he was trying to play that race card there. He's just being realistic. Kind of that, segment or that statement I just made there about Susie Colbert, like not only because she's a woman, but what she did in her tenure. And just so because she happens to be a woman, I really feel like she made that way for a lot of people. So now we know, all these layoffs have happened. There's more coming. And apparently the worst is yet to come, right?
Yep.
Well, earlier in the year, we know that Pat McAfee breaks out of his deal with FanDuel. Reportedly, it's a 5-year, $85 million deal with ESPN. So I think he takes a little bit of a discount, but I believe he's also looking bigger. Shannon Sharp just gets off of Skip and Shannon Undisputed. Apparently, he said that, he's going to be back on morning television soon. We talked about ESPN's era kind of changing. And, before I ask the question, I feel like when you look at some of these people, like I said it, right? They cut an average of 20 years of experience when you add all these years up and divide them by just the people that I, laid out here. A lot of these were, in terms of the broadcasting game, old heads. Like, I'm not even being rude, but these people were literally in 25 years, 27 years, 16 years, 17 years, 16 years, 23 years, 23 years with Steve Young, like a legend.
Yeah.
People are just absolutely done away with. So it's like they're shifting eras. They're shifting their identity. They're bringing in an edgy Pat McAfee. They're bringing in TV's favorite uncle and Shannon Sharp, possibly. Apparently Shannon's been in talks with FanDuel. But do you think that's possibly the cause? I mean, of course, they wanted to reduce costs. Like Disney said, these layoffs were coming. ESPN knew it was involved. With Pat McAfee coming in, with a lot of older talent being fired because of how long they've been in. I mean, do you think a cause of it could be Pat McAfee? Is this maybe making an opening for Shannon Sharp? How do you necessarily feel about that?
Now, I think Pat McAfee is an example of the overarching thing, which is that the attention span of the average human being has gone down tremendously over the past couple of years.
Oh yeah.
You look at the rise of things like TikTok, you look at the rise,
short
not
form
really,
video did
not really the rise of Twitter, because Twitter's always been popular. But like when you think about, especially in the sports context of things, the rise of Twitter, when you look at things like this, podcasts and podcast-like formats, like the informality of this, as lovely as this show is, as lovely as my show is, as lovely as the shows on Give Us a Shot Network, and just to plug some people that I know, just for example, like as lovely as Justin's show is with hashtag this Justin, and as great as like my guy Jalen Hunter with the Unpopular Podcast, as great as Road Talk with MJ is, as great as Steezy A. Smith is, as great as all these pods are, as great as the back pocket pod is, who just rebranded a couple days ago. Like, we are not the stereotypical sports delivery, right? We're not up here in suits and ties, reading teleprompters, yelling at each other for 2 minutes at a time and 5 to 10 minute segments about the biggest news. Like it's very laid back, and it's so much more personable this way, right? We deliver this thing we love. We deliver sports news. We deliver sports content in a much more relatable, much more down to earth way for the average viewer or for the average listener than ESPN does and has done. Do you know what I mean? So when you're talking about bringing in a guy like Pat McAfee, major props to Pat McAfee and what he's been able to do post NFL and
Yep.
how he's been able to revitalize himself and make a career out of this. And
Yep.
what he does is amazing. But what Pat McAfee represents, what Shannon Sharp represents with Club Shay Shay, like, let's think about this for a second. Can we talk about the number of people now more than ever that get off of their morning shows on TV, whether it's Fox Sports, ESPN, whatever,
Yes.
and go do a radio show or like you've got Ryan Clark and Daniel Cormier. They've got a show. You obviously talked about Keyshawn, J. Will, and Max, which is formerly Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin, right? Stephen A. has his own podcast. The Skip Bayless has a podcast. Shannon
Yep.
Sharp obviously started his own podcast. Like
Yep.
basketball players
Colin
now,
Cowherd started a whole podcast
yeah,
network and works for
like
FS1.
like Volume Sport, like
Very remarkable.
basketball players now have their own, like this, like the podcast space, the ability to deliver sports in an informal, laid back, relatable way for the fan to feel so much more connected to players and so much more connected to the on-air personality makes it so much so that as wonderful as the Susie Colberts and the Jalen Roses and the David Pollacks and the Todd McShays of the world are, that form of delivery just isn't it anymore.
Right.
It's just not.
You're
The suit and tie
you're picking up what I'm putting
isn't
down.
it.
Yep.
We're talking about being able to take something just like this and reproduce it on other platforms for the average listener or the average viewer to watch or listen to on the ride to work, on the way home from work, during dinner, like on their Saturdays. And so now what you're able to do is, as a listener, as a viewer, you're able to digest more information because it's not thrown at you in so much information, such a short amount of time. The one show that I love, and the one show that I've always loved, that has never changed as far as I've been watching it, is Pardon the Interruption.
Oh, bro, they kill it.
Because despite the suit and tie feel, it's still very informal in the way that it's produced.
Yep.
And so again, like Pat McAfee, I think, is being the villain because it's his move that has sparked all these things.
Right.
But let's be honest, this was going to happen eventually.
Right.
Because we're just in a new era of viewership.
You're right.
Like we're just in a new era of viewership. We're in a new era of content creation. We're in a new era of content consumption. Yep. And this is just the way that people consume content. That's the big thing.
We're in a new era of content consumption. That's the biggest part. No, I'm there with you, man. ESPN's era is definitely changing. It's definitely going to be something that's kind of being ushered out and new things coming in. I mean, like we said, with a lot of this, very experienced, very, very veteran leadership and just aspects to ESPN, all the reporters that got laid off. I mean, it's just wild to know that guys that pulled that much weight, did multiple shows, were at multiple events, just traveling around the world, pulling the hours that they did for ESPN. It's wild, but you do have to pivot. You do have to adjust because you don't want it to be like, other businesses and just, other stores and companies out there to where because they don't pivot, they either get bought out or they go out of business. And ESPN is in no way, shape, or form to do any of those things. That's literally why they just bring Pat McAfee in. And I hope it's, as much as I hate to see these guys go because it's not going to be the same. Like the NBA is not going to be the same without Van Gundy next to Mike Breen and Mark Jackson or Mark Jackson or, Todd McShay being on, the NFL draft countdown and, doing his mock drafts and Jalen Rose and Neil Everett hosting Sports Center. Like, yes, that's not going to be the same at all, but it makes you hopeful because you have a guy like Pat McAfee coming in, because you do feel this new era just happening for ESPN. You want to have faith for it because as much as, certain people might not like ESPN, they do still have their fair share of programs and shows. And at the end of the day, coverage of sports that people are always going to come back to, so definitely an interesting way for things to play out there. Y'all get in the comments. It's actually the first time saying that on the show. Y'all get in the chat, get in the comments. Let me know what you guys think about the big time layoffs that were served at ESPN.